As I was listening to your discussion on indigenous children and their language, it reminded me of a little study that we did on language appreciation a couple of years back. And we found that children could explain when and why they use their mother tongue or Filipino and English. And one beautiful example is that when they said that they use their indigenous language when they talk to plants, because that's the language that the plants on their land understand. It's almost like a secret language that they use, and it's always in relation to their land.
Yes, yes. Well, and place and language and place and identity are so closely connected. I found it interesting too in Joyce's study, where I think the greatest percentage of use of Tagalog was when talking about places. And to me, that really seemed consistent with what we're finding now that play one was looking more at English language, and now play two is moving into looking at children's indigenous language learning. And so we're seeing that there's a real connection between place and thinking about the relationship with place and thinking about identities within particular places connected to the language, in particular, the children's indigenous languages.
There's a comment on the Q&A. In the summary, words that strongly resonate and come to his mind are reading connection. And he said that reading words to connect to people in a place perhaps is really something that resonates with his experience, I suppose.
Yes. Well, and I'm not sure if you're talking about the audience of the video camera, the teacher. If I don't get a sense when I look at the interactions that the children are thinking much about the teacher, but definitely if you're talking about the language or the audience in terms of the children in the play, that is most certainly the case. And that's what I see Facebook as an indicator of the children's awareness of their audience, because they want the others in their play group to engage with them in particular ways. And so they don't want to seem like they're too pushy. They don't want to seem like they're trying to get their way all the time, although in some cases they are. So they use face work strategies to be able to convince others in a sort of gentle, socially acceptable way, so that they can do the things they want to do and have others interact in ways that work out for everybody. So to me, that shows a brilliance in terms of children's pragmatic knowledge of language. And I think that's probably what you were finding in your studies with the folklore, with the child-adult interactions, that the children were showing a really strong sense of what the adults were expecting as well, and using a lot of socially learned strategies with language to, well, and nonverbal communication to be able to communicate what they wanted to do.
I see a lot of heads nodding. Okay, does one of you want to comment on what Dr. Peterson just said?
The only thought in my mind is not that would be a nice question to answer by going back over the videos to see what my kids were a little younger, 3 years old, but I think you do see a lot of social how do you say, social awareness and adjustments, and it would be interesting to see what they're doing at a younger age as well.
And non-verbally as well.
Yes, non-verbally as well. Non-verbally as well, since the video material is there.
There's a question from Jem Javier. I was wondering, are the children aware that there are audiences when they engage in social dramatic play? If not, would there be any difference in their behavior or language use?
And yes, I think they are truly aware of audience. They understand the expectations, social expectations, and I think the children who are excluded in play, and some of the teachers in the study were trying to use the information they gathered through that assessment tool. The children who are not as successful at being able to interact and sometimes feel excluded, the teachers were starting to try to teach some of these face work strategies, for example, just through demonstration or providing suggestions for how the child could interact, to see if that would help the children to be able to engage more fully in the play with their peers.
The face work and the face saving angle struck me, because usually face work and face saving is associated with Oriental cultures. And there's a lot of literature about the Western culture versus Oriental culture. It being seen vis-a-vis what is social linguistic and pragmatic, where children are concerned, is a quite interesting point. And my second remark has something to do with that, the pragmatics of oral language and the social linguistics of it all, the nonverbal aspect. If we think about the nonverbal, or in the context of children's books, we're talking about pictures. And I think what has not been given due recognition yet is the aspect of visual literacy and the important role that pictures play in picture books and in many children's books. In the same manner that the nonverbal aspect of language and face-to-face interactions matters, I think we also have to start looking at the more visual and less verbal aspect of child-directed print in the same way.
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I'm doing a study right now with two professors, one who is indigenous, one from the United States, one from Canada. And we are analyzing just the images in books that are deemed to be about rural and rural non-indigenous and rural indigenous communities or protagonists. And we are finding that there are very strong social messages about what it means to be like the social construction of rural, both in indigenous and in non-indigenous contexts, that are communicated just in the images, that you don't have to have, like we are also looking at the text to some degree, but for the most part, we're looking at the images, and the images tell a lot. They are sending very strong messages, in this case, about what it means to be rural.
And pictures do paint. A picture can paint 1,000 words, as the song goes.
Very true. And pictures that can be interpreted in so many different ways, right? So all of us who are on this analysis team are from rural communities, communities of less than 1,000 people. And so we bring our lens as well. I think it might be interesting in another study to take a look at how urban researchers look at these images as well.
I'm just really excited about the work that you're doing. I'm really passionate about children's literature and cultural identities. So I can't agree more that place and identity sort of mixes together, or merges rather, with language. And it also provides a lot of narrative. I mean, at least this is what I have found in some of the work that I've read also, is that it also provides a certain narrative for understanding cultural identity for the reader themselves. I've actually never worked with or observed work also from child language point of view or child directed speech point of view. So it has been quite interesting to see how children themselves talk. Children's books are for children, but they're written by adults. So it's also interesting to see how children themselves build different ideas of the world and how they use it.
Well, and your study with the folklore is really exciting in that respect as well. And looking at how the children construct themselves within, their identities as they are engaging in the games and the songs and being told the stories.
I think it's so important because sometimes we don't provide, agency is not provided, but in a lot of cultures, the child is not considered to be an agent being. And that's how sometimes it's also reflected in the literature. So I do believe that the work that everyone's doing is allowing for the child to become more agent in our minds.
There's a question on our Q&A. Prof Shelley, interesting study in the diagram. What were the teachers reflecting about in their lessons? If so, when was the reflection done? During, before, or after their lesson?
So if I'm interpreting your question correctly, the reflection, for one thing, whenever a team of collaborative action researchers was put together, we always made sure that there was at least two people. Whether it was a teacher and an early childhood educator, or a group of teachers or a group of early childhood educators, with the idea that talk is really important also for adults, for learning, for thinking through and reflecting. So we didn't ask the teachers to do any kind of written reflection or to reflect necessarily on their own. The reflection took place in the meetings when we were all looking at the data together. The teachers would ask us to talk about particular videos, and then we would, the teachers would come with some questions, we would come with some questions. And so our conversation was more like a reflective conversation.
We have 1 minute to 10 o'clock, but Joyce is raising her hand. So please go ahead.
No, it's actually a related question, is why I raised my hand. But I really love that it's a collaborative action research. And my question is, how do the teachers feel about that, about being involved so that intensely in the research process?
Well, for one thing, the teachers are all volunteers, and we try as much as possible to respect their time. In some cases, there aren't supply teachers in the communities, and so we have to meet after school. And we try as much as possible to make it like an event. So we bring a lot of food with us and so on. There aren't always restaurants, for example, in the communities. And I think the teachers have been saying that they love the validation of their work, that there are professional benefits that make it worthwhile to participate. But there have been some teachers who have said, I'm sorry that I just can't continue because of the workload and because of my, my personal commitments. So I would say the key is to have as many people as possible from the community, because the teachers support each other. And also, I think as much as possible to have the school boards on board so that we can have some release time for teachers. But if you're asking how is this in terms of workload and the commitment for the teachers, I would say it is a great workload. It is a great commitment. We try as much as possible also to develop capacity in terms of professional leadership. So all of the teachers who have been interested have either co-authored or we have funding to bring teachers to conferences. So they have been to the International Literacy Association conference, to regional conferences, and so on. So we try as much as possible to make it a professional learning experience. And I know that in one situation, a teacher had said to me at the end of the year, if I had known how exciting this year was going to be being part of this collaborative action research project, I wouldn't have submitted my retirement papers back in August. So that's a real endorsement of just the level of excitement, I think, on the part of the teachers. But it does take also, this year we haven't been able to carry out Now Play project activities because we can't travel. I think it's really important, even though it's expensive. Thank goodness we have lots of funding and lots of time. We have 7 years for this project. I think it's really important to be there in person, that it really shows the teachers and the community members that we value who they are and the work that they're doing.